today's top boxing news.
Obviously, I am disappointed. I'm hurt. But at the same time, I'm very grateful. I'm blessed. We made it this far. Doesn't end here. Felt like I was set up from the beginning, man. But I felt like I did enough to pull the win. But it is what it is. Everything happens for a reason. Thank you, everyone, for supporting me, showing me mad love, and believing in me. Time to work harder. Also, on a side note, if you pro, stay the fuck up out the amateurs. Please, because you pro for a reason. I'm mad. I did enough.
That is U.S. Olympian Jaria Gonzalez, the sister of Joette Gonzalez. You might be familiar with that name. You might have seen him a couple of times on ESPN top-ranked shows. Jaria was just eliminated from the Paris Games by none other than reigning IBF lightweight champion of Brazil, Beatriz Ferreira, two-time Olympian. She's competing in these Olympics, and she competed in the last Olympics. Bringing back to the forefront conversation, is it at all ethical for professional boxers to return to the amateurs for amateur gold? Does their professional experience give them a competitive edge, an unfair advantage over the amateurs? You can see that Jaria is visibly upset, and I expect her to be. A lot of these Olympians work very hard for years at a time, preparing and competing in tournaments, building themselves up towards these Olympic Games just to have their dreams dashed by someone who has already gone pro.
Somebody who's already a world champion.
Is it unethical? Is there something to be said about that? Well, I'll say this. If it weren't for Jaria beating Estelle Mosley, she might have had a point. Estelle Mosley, Olympic gold medalist Estelle Mosley, who's also a professional boxer. In fact, Estelle has been a pro longer than Beatriz Ferreira. Estelle debuted as a pro in 2018, whereas Beatriz debuted as a pro in 2022, some years later. If being a pro gave a fighter a competitive edge, then Jaria wouldn't have beat her.
Jaria beat Estelle.
Before Jaria ended up with Beatriz Ferreira in front of her in these Olympic Games, she first had to go through Olympic gold medalist and professional boxer Estelle Mosley, and she beat her. She beat Estelle. So if it really were about professional experience giving a fighter a competitive edge, she would have never made it past her.
Then why couldn't she beat Beatriz?
Because Beatriz is just a better fighter. I know it's hard for a fighter to admit that after having put in all that work, but that's the look of it. That's not even the first time Beatriz beat her. Beatriz beat her in October of last year.
In the amateurs.
Yes, she did. Because Beatriz Ferreira has been juggling both an amateur and professional boxing career, and she already beat Jaria last year in October. So maybe what it is that just, Beatriz, she's got her number.
Maybe.
I don't think it's because she's a professional boxer. I don't think it's that simple. And that is a more nuanced conversation than people realize, because professional experience does not guarantee amateur gold. If it did, then it would be nothing but professionals medaling in these Olympics, and it's not.
Don't you remember that former unified middleweight champion Christina Hammer, after having fought as a pro for many years, she went into the amateurs in the hopes of achieving Olympic gold, and she didn't make it. She got eliminated.
Characterizing that just because you fought as a professional, that doesn't mean you're going to have an advantage, a competitive edge, in the amateurs.
Then why does Jaria feel like a woman hard done?
Well, look at who she drew. She drew an Olympic gold medalist and a professional boxer in Estelle Mosley. Then she drew a reigning world champion and a silver medalist in Beatriz Ferreira. I mean, the way she was matched, it's almost like they didn't want her to make it.
It's tough.
And that conversation as to whether or not it's ethical to have professional boxers returning to the amateurs and competing against amateurs, what I'll say is that the amateurs and the pros really are different beasts.
Amateur experience translates better into pro boxing than pro experience translates into the amateurs, because in the amateurs, you're really only fighting for 3 rounds.
You're not out there for very long. So if you're one of these fighters that maybe needs 1 or 2 or 3 rounds to get into a groove, well, in the amateurs, that won't help.
I feel for Jaria. I do. But I actually happen to think it's not over. She can get better, and what she didn't do in the amateurs, she can do in the pros.
Though if Beatriz Ferreira beat her, it's not because Beatriz Ferreira has a competitive edge as a professional, it's because she is a decorated amateur, and she was all those things before she ever went pro.
It's because on the day she was the better fighter.
Yeah, listen, I don't think Canelo wants to fight speedy guys who box off the back foot and counter punch. That's why I think he liked the Munguia fight and he likes the Berlanga fight, because they're two guys that will come face on and have a war with him. Do you know what I mean? And he likes those kind of fights. He doesn't like... he was disappointed with the Charlo fight because he just ran the whole fight. And Crawford would probably do the same, to be honest. Like, that's how you'd fight him.
And so Eddie Hearn believes that Canelo Alvarez now has an aversion to fighting a mover and a speedster, a jabber, an outside fighter, based on how things played out with Jermell Charlo, that for all of that talk, Jermell didn't come to fight, he came to survive. Would the same be true for Terrence? And I don't think so. I think Terrence, at minimum, would try to put on a more ambitious performance than Jermell Charlo in his footwork.
It's more subtle and nuanced.
Whereas Jermell's is more basic. You're moving the way you're moving, in the direction you're moving, and not engaging because you don't want to fight. You don't want to win. You just want to survive, collect a check, and go home.
Which is annoying. It's annoying for the paying customers, the people that pay to be there, the ones purchasing the pay-per-view at home, as well as for Canelo Alvarez.
It's annoying for him too, the number of fighters that are using his name so that if one of them gets the opportunity, they're not even really trying to win or trying to fight. They're just trying to survive.
Do you think that's the case with Crawford?
No, I don't. I don't think Terrence is simply trying to talk himself into a payday with Canelo Alvarez. I genuinely believe Terrence thinks he can win because he's that kind of fighter, that kind of competitor. He's that ambitious. He likes his chances, even if some of you don't.
So would he fight the same way that Charlo did?
Perhaps a variation of what Jermell Charlo did, a better version of that fight, where of course he's going to have to move around and create distance, create space, pot shot from the outside, as Canelo is the naturally bigger man. So it's not a good idea to sit in the pocket with him. Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford are roughly around the same height, but not necessarily the same build. Terrence Crawford, in spite of being the smaller man moving up, would have the longer arms of the two, and it would behoove him to use that to his advantage, keeping distance and creating space between himself and Canelo, pot-shotting and working off the counter. That doesn't even mean that that would work, but that is what he would have to do. It doesn't behoove him to trade punches with the naturally bigger and stronger man mid-range to inside.
Does Canelo knock him out?
That's a distinct possibility that I don't rule out, that perhaps Terrence would be biting off more than he could chew at 168 pounds, where Canelo has been for some years now, that for all of Terrence's virtues and ambition, he might go up there, he might get stopped, or he might pull off the unthinkable.
He might win.
Like Sugar Ray Leonard scraped a win over Marvin Hagler, coming off a lengthy stint of inactivity. He went from welter up to middle, and he actually beat Marvin.
This is a bigger jump, though.
But stranger things have happened, and Canelo Alvarez now has the added pressure of delivering a big fight with a big name, given that he's fighting Edgar Berlanga next, and not David Benavidez. The outrage is felt, because a lot of people were looking forward to that Benavidez fight, and now it doesn't seem to be happening. Edgar is not an adequate substitute. After that, if Canelo wins, and everybody's expecting him to...
It doesn't look like he's fighting David, so fighting Terrence would be the next best thing. The next big thing.
Big fight. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh has said that he's going to make a play to do that fight. He's going to offer Canelo Alvarez a number that he thinks is fair, and will take it from there.
This could be a very big fight.
Combining two separate factions of fans, two different demos, those who support Terrence Crawford, those who support Canelo Alvarez, and the spectacle of it. It's hard to imagine that anybody beats Terrence Crawford.
Knocks him out.
Though Canelo Alvarez is not just anybody. It's a very different situation moving up in weight for a fighter like Canelo Alvarez, who is many levels above the fighter that Terrence Crawford is about to fight in Israel Madrimov. And for this door to stay open, Terrence has to not only take care of business this weekend at 154, he has to do it in dominant fashion at 154, so that we can believe he stands a chance at 168.
There's a lot of moving parts.
And a lot that needs to happen. But if Terrence holds up his end of the bargain this month, and Canelo holds up his end of the bargain next month, in the absence of a David Benavidez fight, This would be the next big thing.
The next best thing.
Crawford's got options if the Canelo fight doesn't happen. Crawford's got options. He could fight Sebastian Fundora. He could fight Bakram Murtazaliev. Jermel Charlo says that he's coming back to 154. I don't necessarily believe him, but he says that and he's there, so that's another option. Whereas for Canelo, if he beats Edgar Berlanga, but you're not fighting David Benavidez, and you're not fighting Terence Crawford, well then who are you fighting that people should pay $80 to see it?
That they should pay per view. Who are you gonna fight?
Who? The winner of Skull versus Shishkin, the winner of that fight, because that makes for a bigger fight than this one?
Come on.
As much of a fan of Canelo as I am, I can't help but think that beyond the Edgar Berlanga fight, there will be added pressure to make something happen, something big, with a big name.
Not just anybody.
So let's say Terence Crawford goes in there with Madrimov this weekend, and he does to him what he did to Jeff Horn. He completely dominates the guy and stops him. That keeps the hope alive for a Canelo-Alvarez fight. And that could be a very, very big fight.
It captures the imagination.
It's something you have to see because you can't really imagine Terence Crawford losing to someone in that situation, though at the same time, Canelo Alvarez is one of the pound-for-pound best boxers in the sport right now. He's not just anybody at 168.
It's the question that makes people buy. It's the question that makes people want to see it. If you put two guys of this caliber in the same ring with each other, who's gonna win?
Terence has got some advantages and Canelo's got some advantages. It's the kind of fight you have to see it to believe it. So there's money there. In men's heavyweight news, heavyweight prospect Moses Ituama hammers Marius Vach in just 2 rounds. I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw, and this speaks to what I said in a previous video a few weeks back, that the future of the heavyweight division lies not in America, it lies across the pond, it lies in the UK and other parts of Europe. Moses Ituama took just 2 rounds to bomb out the usually durable Polish man Marius Vach. Streaking 19-year-old southpaw prospect Ituama is now 10-0 with 8 KOs, and he made a positive start, firing out a quick jab and backing Vach up early with a short counter right hook. Vach held his left low,
inviting trouble,
and he became progressively gun-shy as Itauma was finding it straightforward, threading through counters. What I saw from Moses was thoroughly impressive. It's not that he beat Marius Vach so much as how he beat him.
And how fast he did it.
The combinations, the hand speed, the accuracy, and the power from a kid who's only 19 years old, and he's not even all that big a heavyweight. He's nowhere near as physically imposing as a Marius Vach. With unified heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk watching on from the front row, Itauma started to pepper Vach in the second round, catching the 44-year-old freely with both hands. Vach couldn't get out of the way of anything, and he was dumped onto his shorts by a right hook. And although Vach made it back to his feet, the Ben Davison-trained Itauma swarmed towards with lefts and rights, working both the lead and body and punching from various angles. It was a matter of time before the end came, and referee Michael Alexander intervened after 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Vach is not what he used to be, clearly, but last year he survived the full 10 rounds with another British prospect in Fraser Clark.
Whereas in this fight, he couldn't make it to the 3rd round with Moses Itauma.
I do feel like Marius Vach was known for people taking the distance, but he's not boxed someone like me before, said Itauma. I feel like that is a big statement. I think the quickest he's been stopped is 6 rounds, and I've done it in 2.
Impressive.
It lets the heavyweight division know that I'm here. I'm only 19, but come on, man. Give me some credit. I think all the things about Moses Ituama now that I used to think about Jared Anderson before he started losing focus and unraveling his legal woes outside of the ring and lackluster performances inside of the ring. I used to have a much higher opinion of Jared Anderson, who's going to be in action this weekend on the undercard of Crawford versus Madrimov. What I used to think about Jared, I now think about Moses.
And at only 10-0, 19 years old, I don't want to get carried away with Moses. I don't want to say that he's the future of the heavyweight division per se, the ruler.
That's presumptuous. He will have enough fighters to contend with before he can see himself rule this weight class some years and some fights from now. But I would sooner say that about Moses then I'd say that about Jared, because I don't even know that Jared is going to win this weekend, whereas Moses...
That was an acid test with Marius Vach. Marius Vach has been in there with any number of solid fighters, very good fighters, over the years. I've never seen him dispatched like that, and that quickly.
And by a fighter who isn't the most physically imposing heavyweight, isn't the biggest heavyweight around. Maybe that lends itself to Moses' arsenal, that he's not just strong and powerful and fast, he's agile, light on his feet, staying on the outside of Marius Vach's jab, then countering it over the top, stringing punches together, overwhelming the fighter with not just power but speed.
And angles.
Most heavyweights today, most heavyweights out there, even the good ones, they're not that light on their feet. How many of them can cut angles, punch from those angles, awkward angles, to fluster a guy the way a lighter man would?
It's really something.
He's younger than all the other guys, all the other unbeaten up-and-comers like Frazier Clark and Fabio Wortley, David Adelaide,
Johnny Fisher.
Moses Ituama is a much younger fighter than all of them, but oddly enough, he's exhibiting a higher ceiling. I mean, compare who he just knocked out to who Johnny Fisher knocked out. Marius Vach is, by and large, a more experienced heavyweight than Alen Babic, who Johnny Fisher just knocked out.
And he's a bigger man, a much bigger man than Alen Babic, who Johnny Fisher just knocked out.
What are you saying?
I am more impressed with Moses Itauma knocking out Marius Vach than I am with Johnny Fisher knocking out Alen Babic.
It's a stronger statement over a more experienced and bigger fighter. Moses Ituama versus Johnny Fisher. Moses Ituama versus any one of these other unbeaten up-and-comers and guys hanging around heavyweight. They can be built into big fights, very big fights, and the big money in the heavyweight division for the next 2, 3, 4 years, it's going to be across the pond. It's going to be the UK and other parts of Europe.
It's going to be in those markets, not this one, because all we've really got in this one is Jared Anderson, who might lose this weekend, and Richard Torres, who it's too soon to tell. He's a fun young fighter to watch, but we don't know how far he's going to go.
He hasn't actually fought someone as experienced, as seasoned as a Marius Vach yet, and we'll see how he fares when he does. But right now, Moses Itauma is looking like the leader of the new school.
Kid's really something.